Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to be making 5 fall baking recipes. Let's do it! We're starting with this French apple cake recipe from Once Upon a Chef. This is everything you need to get started. It's a lot of basics that we already had on hand, plus some dark rum. This was my first time making this recipe and it turned out so well. It was really simple and so delicious. I 100% am going to be making this one again, and probably sooner than I care to admit. After I chopped up the apples, I creamed together some butter and sugar till it was nice and fluffy and smooth and so delicious you want to eat it. And then I added the eggs one by one, scraping the bottom of the bowl to make sure I got all the little bits incorporated. I don't know why I have to do the accents, but I just do. Then I added in the vanilla extract and the rum. Don't skimp on the rum because it gives it such a good flavor. I feel like you need it to really complete the profile of this recipe. Like every great baking recipe, of course, you're supposed to have a bowl for your dry ingredients and a bowl for your wet ingredients and then mix the two together. But I always take the lazy way and just go ahead and add the dry to the wet. And I really haven't had any problems with that so far, and it saves a lot of time. So you do you, boo. I went ahead and added the salt and the baking powder and flour directly into my mix, just making sure that I scrape things down periodically and it all gets well incorporated and not too overmixed. I think Baby Addie has something to add to the VO. Yeah? Oh, wow. That's what you do in this recipe? Right. So, exactly what she said. You should have a beautiful, light cake mix. So fluffy. Look at this. So smooth. Obsessed. Then we just fold in the chopped apples gently. Like tucking a baby in, a baby cherub in. Just tucking it in. So soft. So sweet. Good night, sweet angel. I am well aware while recording this VO that I sound absolutely crazy, but thanks for going on this ride with me, you guys. You know, watching cooking videos, I love doing it, but sometimes they can be super boring. And if anything, hopefully this video will not be. Whew! Back to the recipe. This recipe calls for either a springform pan or you can use a normal cake pan. You just have to make sure you line it with parchment paper and spray it so it pops out easily. I had no problem with it coming out, and look at that, fresh out of the oven. It looks stunning, absolutely stunning, darling. What a cake she is, what a cake. While I turn this cake out topsy-turvy style, let me just remind you that the link to all of the recipes in today's video are in the description box below, so you can have the exact measurements and steps. Here's a look at the finished cake. It was so good. I just topped with some powdered sugar and sliced it up. You can use some whipped cream or Cool Whip on top. It was so simple and fantastic. One of my all-time favorite fall baking recipes is this pumpkin bread. I have been making this bread every year for at least the last 7 years. Yes, it's the best. It's also perfect for gifting to your neighbors or friends. I'm mixing the wet ingredients together and having those stirred up till they're nice and smooth. I do follow the recipe exactly how it's written. Usually I end up doubling it. And I have noticed that, I don't know if it's my ovens in the past, even my oven now is the same situation, but it always seems to take longer to bake than the recipe says. So that's something to keep an eye out for. I'm going about this the lazy way and just throwing all those dry ingredients straight in and mixing it up. No big deal. One thing that I do think makes this recipe the best pumpkin bread recipe that you can find is the spices. It may seem like you're putting a lot of spices in, but trust me, that's what makes it so flavorful and unique. I'm adding cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves, and ground ginger as well. I love the ginger because it gives it a nice little kick. Once you have it all mixed up, it does seem like a relatively thin mix, but don't worry, it's going to turn out fantastic. For those of you who don't know, we live in South Florida, so fall is literally non-existent. There are no seasons here. The only way to put yourself in a festive fall mood is to just manufacture it. And that's what we're doing here. 5 fall baking recipes to manufacture your Florida fall. I have had the pleasure of living in a place with actual seasons, and I do miss those beautiful falling leaves. Now that our bread is done baking, I'm just turning it out. I thought I had them completely cooked through. That's why I say to double check, because it turns out that once I sliced it, I was able to see that the top was just a bit underdone, just a tiniest bit soft. I probably could have popped it back in for a little bit more, but I mean, you can see it's totally fine. It's delicious and good. Just spread with some butter or cream cheese and enjoy. Now we're gonna whip up a ridiculously easy recipe. It's called caramel croissant pudding. I guess here in the US we would say bread pudding. It's a recipe by Nigella Lawson. This is my first time making it, and not only was it absurdly simple, it's also an amazing way to use old croissants. So if you had croissants that were sitting out and got stale, you didn't get to use them in time, this super easy recipe uses stuff that you probably already have on hand. It's just the torn up croissants, then you make a beautiful caramel and bake it, and it is so good. I think I've made a caramel sauce maybe once or twice before. It's not too complicated. I think the main trick is not to stir it at all once it's gotten started, and make sure that it doesn't burn, of course. Mine started getting super brown right over the heating element, which makes sense. So I just made sure to kind of move the pot around so I could kind of even it out. Then the recipe tells you to go ahead and add the heavy cream in, which immediately seized the caramel. But I kind of figured that's must be what it's supposed to do, as that's what's the logical thing that happens. So I just continued to stir it and stir it and stir it over the heat until it kind of broke up. Then I turned off the heat and added in the egg, making sure not to cook the egg. But as you can see, I think I did get a few little teeny chunks. It made no difference in the long run though. So you pour the caramel cream mixture over and just bake it till it's nice and warm and incorporated. The final product is this delicious, gooey, kind of custardy caramel deliciousness that you can top with some whipped cream or Cool Whip and enjoy. Oh boy, this recipe for pumpkin whoopie pies did not turn out exactly how I anticipated. I was so excited to do this one and try it for the first time. I got this little cookie majigger, and it didn't quite turn out like the pictures, but I will say it still tasted really good. I'm not sure if this is a local seasonal issue, but down here all of the grocery stores are sold out of pumpkin puree. I was only able to get this one big can, which I had to split between the pumpkin bread and these whoopie pies. 2020's got us out here baking up a storm. This recipe has pretty much all the same ingredients as the pumpkin bread that we made earlier, but maybe different ratios or something. So I guess you'll see soon that the problem was that the cookies themselves didn't hold together so well, and the batter just seemed a little bit thin. When I put it into the pan, it kind of spread, and then when it baked, it spread even more. It just ended up being really soft and spongy. If I was going to make it again, I think I would adjust the ratios, put a little bit more flour and a little bit less oil. Just get it to the right consistency where when I scoop it onto the pan, it holds together a little bit better. Overall though, the flavor was amazing, and I think the balance of the spices was perfect. It all really came down to the texture. You can see here as I'm scooping it or flopping it, flippity flopping it onto my very well worn baking sheets, how it's just kind of spreading. Now that I've popped these beautiful disasters into the oven, I'm going to get the icing ready for the middle. Normally when I make icings, I do buttercream because hello, it's buttercream. It's amazing. It's delicious. It's wonderful. If you haven't had it, you need to. But this recipe is like some kind of traditional icing that uses shortening, which I actually had to go out and buy. It's not in that many recipes that I've had to make, surprisingly. These cookies would be great with buttercream icing or really any kind of icing, to be honest, but I can see why they had you make this traditional kind of one because it's not too sweet, but it holds up really well to like the spicy cookie. You can see here as I try to remove the cookies from the baking sheets just how soft they are, and as I'm filling them with icing, they're kind of crumbling and falling apart. I really think just a small adjustment to the ratios would have solved the problem, and besides that, I think the recipe was awesome. Otherwise I wouldn't have included it in the video. I will say that the cookies themselves are extremely flavorful with the spice levels there. So if you like gingerbread, you'll probably love them. If you're not a big fan of gingerbread with like those full flavors, then maybe this recipe is not for you. And here's the final look at the finished product in all their messy, sloppy, crumbly glory. But some of them turned out looking perfectly. Most of them not so much. And that, my friends, will bring us to the very last recipe in this fall baking video. This is salted caramel apple pie bars from Sally's Baking Addiction. This was my first time making this recipe. It's kind of a multi-step one. It's not advanced or difficult in any way. It's just a little bit more intensive than some of the other recipes in this video, but it's very impressive. It's perfect for a party and it feeds quite a bit. We had far too much of this for just ourselves. Perfect to share. The first step is pretty much making the crust. So it's the very bottom layer of the bars. It's just a simple shortbread crust with butter, sugar, vanilla, salt, and flour. Then you just spread it out in a parchment-lined baking sheet, making sure that you get it as even as possible. I ended up trimming off the excess paper because it was just getting in the way. While that shortbread crust is baking away in the oven, it's time to get the apple pie filling layer ready. So I'm just starting out by peeling all of my apples. Then I'm going to slice them up thinishly before tossing them lightly with some flour, sugar, some cinnamon, and nutmeg. While we're getting ready to wrap up this last recipe and sign off on this video, I just wanted to thank you all for watching our little teeny tiny baby channel. Thank you so much for checking out this video. I've really loved sharing my recipes with you guys. I've cooked so many recipes. I have a ginormous list of recipes that I've tried and we love and I make again and again. But I also enjoy this opportunity to try new things as well and share them with you guys. But I'm always looking forward to new ideas for future videos. So if you have any special suggestions or recommendations for anything that you'd like to see, be sure to leave it below. I'll definitely check it out. The last component on these salted caramel apple pie bars, geez, that name is a mouthful, is this delicious streusel topping with oats and sugar and all that good stuff. So pretty much you top your baked shortbread crust with the apple pie filling, and then you crumble the streusel on top. Unfortunately, my butter was not quite melted when I got to this step, so my streusel topping kind of clumped together. Of course, the end result tasted fantastic. It made no difference at all, but streusel is definitely supposed to be more crumbly and dry and less wet than it was in my version. And here's the beautiful result. I let it sit in the fridge for a while so it got nice and hard and stuck together before peeling off the parchment, cutting it into slices, and topping with some salted caramel sauce. You can totally make your own caramel sauce from scratch. I've actually done that in the past, but this time I went for the store-bought kind and it was just as good, to be honest. I will say that I think my shortbread crust was a little bit blonde. It probably could have baked a bit longer, but it didn't taste floury and it was so good. And that's it. Time to get your nom on.